Chapter 5. After school on Friday, Mama wanted me to stop by Parsons' grocery on the way home to get Christine some milk. I was in such a hurry, I almost ran into one of the teacher's cars. I don't know why I was in such a rush. Mr. Parsons was talking to some guy when I came in. He smiled and waved, then kept right on talking. I dug in my pocket and pulled out the wad of money that Mama had given me. There was a little note held to the dollar bills with a paper clip. I unfolded it. Velveeta cheese, half-gallon milk, 1 can water-based tuna, large, 1 candy bar, whatever you want. Love, Mama. I couldn't help smiling when I read it. I gathered all the items on the list as quickly as I could, then trotted back to where Mr. Parsons leaned against the cash register. He was still talking. And what all did they take? The man standing across the counter from them shrugged. Sheriff Theobaldou is working on it. So far, they know they're missing about 10 cases of beer, whatever change was left in the cash register, and some bottles of whiskey. Mr. Parsons shook his head. They'll probably have to inventory the whole store. They bust the door or climb through a window? The other man folded his arms. That's what's got the sheriff stumped. No windows busted, no marks on the door from somebody trying to pry open the lock, nothing. The sheriff said the same exact thing happened at Jake's Jewelry about 2 weeks ago. Got a bunch of rings and necklaces and timepieces from the display cases, but they could never figure out how the thief got in. Mr. Parsons nodded. They then pointed up at a metal grate on the wall behind him. Had the same thing here about 3 years back. Bunch of stuff stolen, and no sign of any kind of break-in. Then that air vent fell off one day and darn near busted me on the head. Sheriff said the screws were stripped, and he climbed up and looked in the air conditioner vent with his flashlight. Sure enough, the dust was messed up where somebody had crawled through it. Ever figure out who it was? Mr. Parsons shook his head. No, but whoever it was must have been pretty small to squeeze through that vent. I lifted the tuna can I'd set on the counter, then clunked it down again, hoping the noise would remind Mr. Parsons that I was there and ready to pay for my groceries. It didn't work. Sheriff got any ideas about this one? He asked the man. I cleared my throat. Mr. Parsons? He kind of jumped. He looked at me with a sheepish smile. I'm sorry, Ted, he apologized. I forgot you were standing there. Got everything you need? Yes, sir, I answered as I shoved the wad of dollar bills towards him. Mr. Parsons lifted each item and rang it up on the cash register. Then he counted the money and handed me some change. We were talking about the robbery over at Birdwell's liquor store. Lakeview ain't very big, and anytime there's a break-in, it's news. Didn't mean to make you wait so long. I smiled back at him. It's okay, Mr. Parsons, I lied. I wasn't in any big rush. I picked up the sack he had put the things in and bolted for the door. Like I was saying, I could hear Mr. Parsons start up again. Sheriff got any leads or ideas about this round of robberies? The voices faded behind me. I jumped on my bicycle and tore off down the road. In my head, I started going over all the things I needed to do before Jimmy came over. First off, I'd left my room in a mess. Mama was always fussing about my room. Mostly I kept stuff picked up pretty well, but I needed to straighten it before company came. Next, I needed to find my canteen in case Jimmy and I got thirsty when we explored the swamp tomorrow. I held the sack tighter against my chest and pedaled harder. My bike was really flying when I rounded the corner near our house. I was halfway across the bridge when I saw her. The old woman was down on her knees at the side of the bridge. I gasped, but the air stopped at the sudden lump that jumped into my throat. I grabbed the handbrake and squeezed. My tires squealed, leaving a thin trail of black rubber behind me. The sack of groceries fell from my hand. I grabbed the other brake. The old woman raised her head and looked toward me. There was a tiny pile of loose gravel on the bridge. I hit it. The bike slid. I went down. My left leg stung as it scraped the cement. Still straddling the bike, but lying on my left side, I slid to a stop. Not 10 feet from where I lay, the old woman struggled to her feet. She glared at me with dark eyes. It was the witch of Blackwater Swamp. Chapter 6. It was broad daylight. I'd only seen her once, and that had been in the evening. That's when people talked about her. That's when they said she came from the swamp. I never dreamed she would be here. I never expected her. Not now. I couldn't seem to move. I was frozen, one leg trapped beneath my bicycle. The witch picked up something from the ground. I couldn't tell what it was. She looked at me one last time. She was as old as the river itself. From where I was lying, I could see her wrinkles. They made her face look scarred and angry. Her withered hands were gnarled and twisted like the limbs of a mountain cedar whipped by an angry wind. She tucked whatever she picked up from the bridge against her chest. Then, with her arms wrapped around her treasure, she turned and scurried away. She went down the side of the bridge toward the riverbank. She moved on shuffling feet, with her shoulders and back slumped low like the weeping willows that lined the shady banks. The last thing I saw was the top of her head as it disappeared below the cement bridge rail. I don't know how long I lay there. Finally, a little voice inside my head said, "You're in the middle of the road, stupid. Get up." Kicking my right leg, I shoved the bicycle off me and struggled to my feet. I raced to the side of the bridge, then stopping and cautiously peeked over. The witch was far down the path, still clutching the things she had picked up from the bridge. She rounded a bend in the riverbank and vanished beyond some tall trees. It was then that I felt the pain where my leg had scraped the concrete. My heart was pounding in my ears. My mouth was as dry as cotton. I ran my tongue over my lips and turned around to get my bike and the groceries. When I dropped the sack, it had busted. The can of tuna and the Velveeta cheese had landed clear on the far side of the bridge. One corner of the cheese box was bent and the can was dented, but they were okay. The carton of milk was near my bike. One side was dirty, but it hadn't burst. The M&Ms I'd gotten for myself hadn't fared so well. The little sack they'd come in had popped open and M&Ms were scattered all over the bridge. I left them and picked up everything else. After one last peek to make sure the old witch hadn't turned and come back in my direction, I got my bike. As I walked it past the end of the bridge, I paused to look where I'd seen the old woman kneeling. There was something there. I frowned and looked around some more. That's when I saw it. Blood. A chill raced up my back. My knees trembled. There were only 2 drops, but it was blood. Dark and red, it caught my eye and shined up at me like a flashlight shimmering through a dark night. Pushing my bike, I ran for the house. I could hardly wait to tell Mama I'd seen the witch of Blackwater Swamp. I'd seen her up close, and there was blood on the bridge. I dropped my bicycle in the front yard and raced for the screen door. This was important. This was scary. I had to tell somebody. I never got the chance to tell Mama. She met me as I bounded up on the porch. Her chin jutted out as she glared at me. "Where have you been, young man?" she demanded. My tennis shoes squeaked when I slid to a stop. I stammered. "Well, you're supposed to come straight home after school and—" I leaned to the side and glanced down at the milk, cheese, and tuna that I had clutched against my chest. "You told me to stop at Parsons', remember?" Her angry glare softened. "Oh." I squeezed past her to get inside the house. "He was talking to some guy about a robbery. I had to wait on him. Then, when I was riding across the bridge, I almost ran into that old witch and—" Even though I was well inside the house, Mama still stood holding the screen open. She waved at me to be quiet. "Not right now. I don't have time." "But Mama," I protested. I just had to tell her what I'd seen. "I was riding across the bridge and—" "Not right now," she roared, cutting me off. My lips wrapped around my teeth and I clamped my mouth shut. I could feel my eyes welling up. Mama sighed. "I'm sorry, Ted," she said, still holding the screen open. I didn't mean to yell at you. I forgot about sending you to the grocery store. I'm sorry, but I've got to go. I'll be right back and you can tell me. But Mama, I whined. She shook her head. Whatever happened, you can tell me later. I lost a filling and my tooth's killing me. She opened her mouth and stuck a finger way up inside. I called Dr. Lyons and he said if I hurried, he'd wait for me. She grabbed her keys from her purse and let the screen bounce shut behind her. Give Christine some milk in her little cup with the top on it. You can fix yourself a tuna sandwich. There are chips in the pantry. I went back to the front door. The screen felt cold against my nose. I watched Mama still talking every step of the way to the car. It shouldn't take long, she said, grabbing the door handle. You can tell me what happened on the bridge when I got home. Watch Christine. She slammed the door and drove off. I stood with my nose pressed against the screen and my mouth open. Can't believe it, I moaned to myself. Almost kill myself in a bicycle wreck, pick up the groceries, and she told me to rip my leg open, find blood on the bridge, almost run smack over the old witch, and the only thing she has time to say to me is, watch Christine. My shoulders sagged. The can of tuna rolled from its resting place in my arm. It went clunk on the floor. The box of Velveeta went crunch. She doesn't even care, I grumbled. She never listens to me. Watch Christine. That's all she ever says. Christine was in her high chair. She smiled. Christine was always happy to see me when I got home from school. I glared at her. She smiled even more and held her arms out toward me. Down? She grinned. Aw, shut up.